Hey, I loved
So,
your TikTok about success. I left you some comments
oh, thanks,
on it.
man.
I'm halfway through writing a book. I gave a talk a couple of times, a couple of years ago, about success at entrepreneurship conferences. I have this thing I call the 10 things that I developed years ago for myself. It's like I measure my success in life based on how I rate myself at any given time on 10 things.
Mm.
Um, and one of them is money, financial,
Yeah, yeah,
success.
sure.
It's one out of the 10 things. And I always say at the conference, here's the 10 things, rank them for yourself in order from most important to least important. And once they do that, I say, if money is at the top, you really need to go and have a hard fucking look in the mirror, because for me, I wouldn't trade the money for any one of the other 9 things, which is, health, you know, having love in my life, spiritual peace, happiness, doing something every day that I love to do, having a good relationship with my kids, good relationship with friends. I wouldn't trade money for any of that.
No.
So money should be it should be on there, but for me
Well,
anyway, it should be at the bottom of the list, right?
You shouldn't call it money
money.
though. It's what money gives you that you're actually after.
Well,
And it's
this is
just
the
the action
point.
drug.
And you got it in one because it's a proxy. And what people forget is that proxy facilitates certain things. But because the proxy has become so ensconced in society, we
Yep.
forget the representation. When some of those things, while money can buy them, some of them you can have without money. And people forget that because the proxy is such a dynamic through society.
Yeah.
You
Then the
know,
value of
one,
changes. Sometimes we value things based on what it costs, but we forget to value the things that don't cost.
yeah, yeah, and it can buy some of those things. Like it can buy time is one of the interesting in a way that it can, but you can be smarter than that and just go and give yourself the time without working for 100 years to buy it. Like people say, oh, when I'm rich and when I retire, I'll do this. I go, just fucking do it now. What is
Yeah.
wrong with
Yeah.
you?
What are you waiting for? Yeah.
Like if the surf's up, I will miss fucking deadlines. Like I
Mm.
will fucking miss them, and they'll say, "Where?" I said, "I went surfing."
Mm.
And if you can't roll with that, well, then I'm not working with you because that's how shit is.
Yeah, I learned a lot of that. And we're on the air. Welcome to the Futurist podcast. We'll get to the Futurist stuff in a second, but old mate of mine, I don't know if either of you got to know him at all, but Father Bob passed away a couple of days ago.
Mm.
Bob was, 20, well, not 20, 2006. I think I started working with Bob. Launched his first podcast, The Father Bob Show, on my network back then, and got him on Twitter, and which ended up being a great platform for him. But one of the things that I sort of learned working with him and going out and doing stuff for the homeless, we used to do the food bus on a weekend. We'd go out and feed the downtrodden around South Melbourne. Was that a lot of people say, "Oh yeah, I'll do good works when I'm rich and retired, or I'll go and help, and I'll do that one. I'll give back one day." I'm like, yeah, it's kind of not how it works, really. You need to find ways to give back now. You need to be. I no need to be. Do whatever the fuck you want, I guess. But you need. For me, anyway, I found it. Uh, I don't know, emotionally satisfying to feel like I was taking a percentage of my time and doing something of value for other people without any, uh, you know, uh,
Yeah, so
ambition
Cam,
for financial.
tell me where you'd rank that in the top 10. Where would you slot that
Well,
emotion?
I
Importantly,
actually
right?
don't. I don't rank things in my top 10 really, but there is a thing in there about peace. Having peace of mind is a big thing.
Mm.
Feeling good about yourself every day.
Right.
Feeling
Yeah.
like having this sense of overall peace. And for me, that's a range of things. It's having what I call spiritual peace in a non-religion sense, like your place in the universe, the meaning of life, all of that kind of stuff. Have I done the work, the philosophical work, to feel secure about why I'm here, what I'm supposed to be doing, what does it all mean, where did I come from, where am I going, all the big questions, as well as being able to look at yourself in the mirror at a moral and ethical level, at a values level, feeling like the work that you're doing is contributing to the betterment of not necessarily human society at large even, but just one person, two people, some people, just doing good works in some fashion, I think is good for the quote unquote soul. Again, from a non-religious perspective. Don't want to get sucked into talking about Brian Houston and Hillsong, but I could, but I won't, because that's not the show for this. This is the Futuristic. My name's Cameron Riley. With me, as always, and by always, this is episode 3. So I mean, the last 2 times, my good old mate down in Melbourne, Steve Sammartino. How are you, Samo?
Mate, I am fantastic. I'm very
Australia's
excited.
leading futurist surfer.
That's what I say. That's what I say. Self-proclaimed. But look,
Yeah.
Some people say, how can you call yourself Australia's leading futurist? And I say, any topic, anytime, no prep required. Bring it on.
Yeah. And Australia's #1 expert on AI and education is our guest today, Ian Farmer, coming to us from Sydney. So we got Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane, all representing here today. How are you, Ian Farmer?
I'm great, thanks, Cameron. How are you?
I'm good, thanks, mate. I'm excited to get you on the show to talk about this. But before we do that, we have to welcome our other co-host, our regular co-host, our AI co-host, Sally. How are you today, Sally?
Hey there. I'm doing great today. Thank you for asking. How about you? What can I help you with in the realm of AI or anything else on your mind?
Oh, well, we've got lots of questions, Sally, that we'll get to later on. Did you guys hear that, by the way?
I heard it. She came in fast, mate. She says, I feel like she's had some caffeine this morning.
She's got to keep up with you, Steve. I put her on coked up mode so she can keep up with your level of intensity and passion. We'll ask Sally questions.
You can translate into multiple languages for the viewers that are listening in other languages. Sally can kind of do that translation for us, right?
Yeah, that's their problem. We'll get to that later. Although I will talk a little bit about how I've been using GPT to help me with my Italian, Steve, and we didn't get to talk Italian. Certo. Va bene. Okay, so let's get into, sorry, before we get into all of that, I want to congratulate SpaceX on their successful first test launch of the Starship today, and for the rapid unscheduled disassembly, as they put it in their tweet. As if the flight test was not exciting enough, Starship experienced a rapid unscheduled disassembly before stage separation. I pay that. I like that.
That's nice verbiage. That's nice verbiage.
In other words, it blew up 4 minutes into the flight.
No, this is the SpaceX version of the deconstruction menu, right? Yeah.
Deconstructed menu, yeah. But it got off the ground. It launched successfully. I think that was the main thing. Landing, not so good. Separation and landing. Like, separation is hard. It has separation anxiety. I think we've all had kids that have experienced that.
Like most startups, Cameron, that's exactly their plot in life. So if you're a startup, put that into your thing, yeah.
Blowing up, yeah, it should be in your business plan.
Getting off the ground is the first thing, though. Most people do that.
We put blowing up, not meaning going viral, though, but just literally blowing up. My kids, my 20-year-old, 22-year-old kids who are on TikTok, is like, this post is blowing up. Well, they literally are blowing up. Ian, why don't you tell us a bit about yourself? What's your background, and why do you have photos of magpies on your wall, and why do you have a pet magpie? All of that kind of good stuff.
Okay, so I grew up in Melbourne, where Steve lives. I didn't know what I wanted to study at school. My dad convinced me that IT was the future. This is back in the 80s. I did an IT degree. In second year, I heard this big thing. A lecturer came and said, you guys are going to hear this first. You're the first cohort to hear this new technology, and it's going to change the world. I thought, wow, this is pretty cool. And they introduced this thing. At the time, it was called real-time programming. And I did, not so quickly, but back then, computers were all batch mode, right? So you couldn't get your bank statement during the day. You had to wait till the next day, if you remember back then. So 84, not the book, but that was me in second year at uni. And I then progressively saw the next 20 years of change, disruption, right, through technology. I kind of moved through the IT ranks, ended up kind of transitioning into marketing around the time the internet was born, 99, 2000. And I was working for Mars, so I did lots of work in Asia, and kind of then about 2005, I left Mars and then spent 15 years in advertising, various agencies, looking at the comms side. And I kind of always had a passion for new and emerging technologies. So about 2 years ago, I thought that what was happening with AI was just the same as what I thought I heard in 1984. And that led me back to going into academia. I'm just finishing off a research master's, and I'm passionate about changing the way we educate the world, because I reckon education's that'd be my number one, right? Wouldn't be money. If you got the education, you can earn the money. You know what I mean? So I want to make use of AI to educate the world freely. Yeah. There you go. That's what I'm doing now.
What are you doing at UTS, Ian?
So I'm doing my research. I'm teaching a couple of subjects: design process, another subject in business. I'm also teaching at UNSW ethics and sustainability. Yeah, that's sort of paying the bills while I do my research. But hoping to, I've got a couple of startup things that I'm doing on the side to leverage this. Yeah, for good. Yeah.
Very cool.
My
Steve,
pet magpies come and visit me. They wake me up every morning. Yeah, and that's why I have that picture on the wall, which is kindly painted by Liz. Yeah.
Painted by
Liz Snell. My partner's sister painted that. Yep.
Oh,
There you
right.
go.
Lovely.
I thought you were
Fantastic.
going to say that it was painted by Stable Diffusion.
Yeah, so did I. I was like,
we don't know.
Is this an AI tool I haven't heard of yet?
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
I forgot that real people still do produce art.
Well,
Wow.
AI tools can. So I saw an update yesterday. In the past 30 days, more than 2,000 AI tools emanating out of APIs, and people now taking a copy and paste from GitHub on LLMs that are out there. It's just insane. And I always like to think about when the iPhone came out. Remember the TV ad? There's an app for that. Well, now there's an AI for that. And then this morning, I thought, well, is there an AI for that? And so I just was about to do a post about it on LinkedIn, and I typed in to find an image. There's an AI for that, thinking someone might have even created an image with that or done a remash so that I could share it on LinkedIn to say, hey, there's more than 2,000 AI tools in the last 30 days. And here's what I found in a beautiful web circular reference. Someone has already made a website called there's an AI for that.com, where it's got all the AIs listed in live form. So there you have it.
So there's like 4 or 5 curated AI web portals, I guess. Probably like the podcast network way back in the day. Canva, you know, there are those emerging. Yeah.
It's crazy. And it's just so many, you almost can't keep up. And I was talking to someone yesterday. I was actually doing a briefing on a company yesterday, and they said, which are the top tools? I said, look, here's the best thing. Assume the tool you need is there and just look for that tool the day you need it. And they said, should we learn it? I said, no, don't learn it. When you see the tool that you need, then use one of the tools to tell you how to use the tool, and then use it, and then forget about it, because then next week there'll be a better one, and then you can use that one. And so, you know, if attention spans are getting shorter, there's also something really interesting about life cycles of tools and use cases and everything getting shorter. Everything is truncating, and it's even like epochs of society. So if you look at the history, and there's a Wikipedia page on each of the epochs of society, from the agrarian age right through and hunters and gatherers, each of them actually is half as long as the previous one, which I find interesting.
Yeah, I think those 2,000 new tools that you mentioned, listeners to the show and people like Ian and my kids have sent me an email about every one of them. You got to check this out. You got to check this out. The last couple of weeks, it's like I was talking to an old mate of mine I worked with at Microsoft in the 90s a couple of days ago, and we were agreeing that we haven't seen this amount of excitement and innovation with this level of rapidity, probably since, 94, 95. I think it's been about 30 years since I've seen this level of excitement. And the barriers to entry are so low, really, for people to innovate on this stuff now, like it was with the web in the mid 90s when Netscape came out. And it was like every day you were like, holy shit, have you seen this? Have you seen that? Did you like this exciting time came out? The iPhone, there's one every 10 years. I was thinking about this the other day. So mid 90s, you had the Netscape and the HTML revolution. By 2007, you had the iPhone, which led to a whole new level of revolution. In the 2015, I think, is when we had like this new sort of social media revolution really kick up to a new level. I mean, Facebook and Twitter had been around since also, 2007-ish, when they started to go mainstream. So that was another whole thing. But the social media stuff didn't have this. It had its own sort of hype and excitement, but because the landscape was sort of dominated very quickly by a couple of very large players, there wasn't a lot of competition. Venture capital sort of solidified around a couple of big players coming out of the valley, and that was it until China came along with TikTok a couple of years ago and blew the lid off of that. Now they're trying, as we I think mentioned briefly last time, Steve, did we talk about it? I might have been on one of my other shows.
We did.
Yeah. The Facebook, etc., have come along and coerced the US government into trying to shut down TikTok or force ByteDance to sell it to an American company because they can't compete. It wasn't the same sort of level of excitement and innovation and entrepreneurship that we're now getting, even though GPT is, sort of the dominant player, or OpenAI is the dominant player in this space, because they have released their API. There's all of this innovation happening on an API level. So it's, it's super exciting. And there's a few tools I want to talk about in this episode that I've been playing with this week: S-GPT, AgentGPT, AutoGPT, GodMode, et cetera, et cetera. But we'll get to that after we drill down with Ian on AI and education. Now, we've all seen, Ian, over the last few months, a lot of fear and loathing in the media about the role that generative AI tools are playing and might play in the future in terms of education. My gut feeling on all of that in the last few months is they all kind of miss the point of AI and education. Why don't you talk to us for a bit about it from your perspective?
Well, if that's the hospital pass, can I go anonymous now and be? No, I can talk to that. So it's a difficult thing, right? So I think most progressive universities were preparing for this last year already, right? What they didn't predict was in November 22, when ChatGPT first got out there, 2 months later there'd be 100 million users, right? So we're just finishing the first semester of teaching in Australia. Midway through, panic set in, right? So there was lots of different committees set up to kind of address this internally in universities. People were talking about the post-plagiarism era, right? Because the big fear is, can you just plagiarize and get an AI to write your assignment? I look at it like this. The current way many disciplines teach in higher education is like a hurdle race. You start at the blocks, every participant does the same 4 usually hurdles, assessments, and they get to the finish line. That's how we assess learning today. And that's got to change, I think, right? So, but there's fear, right? Gosh, how are we going to? So one of the tactics that we use in higher education is defense mode. We've always had plagiarism checkers. They are being updated to try and predict or guess how much of an assignment's been written via AI. And sure, that's one approach. But there's other approaches. I think just like the calculator, when it was first introduced. My brothers were at school actually, and they came home, and my dad was like, "Come on, you've got to still teach people how to actually calculate," which they did. I don't think the calculator stopped us learning how to add up numbers, but it kind of prevented us having to remember what 956 by 43 was. Do you know what I mean? So we don't need to know that as a human. So I think the future of learning, we talk about lifelong learning in education. We want people to know how to learn, right? I was telling my students this week, I measure myself in how much I've learned, but then also how much my learning efficiency has grown, because that leads to a compound interest, take your financial show, into how much I could have learned by the time at the end comes, right? So learning efficiency is important. I think the AI revolution is really about knowledge efficiency. I think that's going to democratize education in a large part. We white Australians, white Westerners, have it for granted, right? We are privileged because we speak English. There are many people in the world who don't grow up speaking English, and because usually it used to be, most of the wealth was in the English-speaking world. They are forced to kind of learn and do an education in English, and then kind of try and work their way up through the English system. AI is going to change that. It's going to make it, it will reduce the barrier so that more people globally can actually achieve that. So what do we do? So if we can defend against plagiarism, we need to integrate AI into education. And that is, we need to allow people, we've got to change the way we assess learning. It's not a hurdle race anymore, in my opinion. It's climbing a mountain. And there are many paths to climbing a mountain, like there are many career paths. So we don't measure people as they jump the same hurdle in a 100-meter race. I think we measure people by their topography as they climb the mountain. There might be 4 or 5 stages. So I think gamification, if you're playing, one of those games, you get to level 1, level 2, level 3. The game has assessed that you've got enough to get to the next level. And they've assessed it by a whole lot of algorithms, and then they actually go to level 2 or level 3. And I think that's the future of how we teach education.
Ian, I do a lot of speeches at schools and education areas, and I actually taught at Melbourne Uni for a period of time too, but those frustrations we can leave till later. What I'd like to know, and I get asked this a lot, and you probably do as well, is now that large language models can do a number of things that we used to be assessed on, and this is a tactical answer I'm looking for, what things should we drop from curricula, from primary school level all the way up to uni, that we used to do? Like, there's some things that now it's like, well, a forklift exists, which is stronger than you. So why would we assess how strong someone is? So I'm really interested in the pragmatic, okay, this thing here, up until now, we did that. You know what? Let's just get rid of that. I mean, we've got the machine now.
Yeah, I can answer that. So that's a good question, Steve. So one of the subjects I teach is design process. It's an Engineers Without Borders sponsored kind of thing. We try and figure out design ideas or design solutions for the Yurundjeri people, which is sort of the Aboriginal and First Nations tribe between Cairns and Port Douglas, right?
Right.
So some of the ideas are things like portable solar power, right? Or a compostable toilet or something, or that sort of things, right? Now, I say to my students, that's fine. If you can buy it from Bunnings, it's a component. What you need to provide me is the solution. How does that thing with the processes, think back to the IT days, Cameron, fit together to be an integrated solution that is culturally sensitive and provides the answer? So that's what the answer is. So AI is like the calculator, right? It's a tool, but we can assess how you use the tool to understand, has that student learned? There you go. That's my answer. But what we drop? Yeah, we drop the things that actually assess things that the AI can already do. Don't ask those questions, because then you're going to be in defense mode trying to stop against plagiarism.
So don't ask questions that the AI can do, which again comes back to a Kevin Kellyism, which is, what questions do we ask the AI? That's like one of his things. The future will be the quality of the questions that you ask. So we actually don't know the answer until we actually look at the question. So we look at a question we might ask some students and then say to ourselves, let's check, can an AI answer or do this? And if it can, then assess maybe what is the quality of that, and is it nuanced, and does it need a human input? And if it doesn't, you go, let's just stop asking that question. So is it almost like we reverse it out until we have the question in front of us that we might ask the students? We don't know whether or not that should be part of an assessment. We should almost go to the tapes, to use some 80 parlance, and go back and say, is this a question worth asking now that AI exists? Check, AI can do this. Let's stop asking that. So is it almost like a reverse thing?
Yeah, I mean, we have this concept in higher education. There's a discipline called learning analytics. Essentially, it's trying to measure the data trace elements of a student journey, and then kind of see whether that student needs intervention, or does it help predict their literacy skills. We're not very good at that. A bit like, when we first tried to do dashboards in business way back in the 80s, there were so many different sources, we couldn't put it all together in the right time frame, right? But what's coming is this. I reckon it's too simplified, Steve, just to cut things out. You need to measure the journey. If you had your own personalized tutor, and you're in second year at university, it's 1984, no, it's 2023. They wouldn't give you the answer. They would actually ask you, how would you start this answer? And then based on what you answer back, they would either guide you by the hand, or they would actually skip you to the next phase, right? So for mine, as long as you get to level 2, you're competent. But if you need help getting to level 2, let the AI bot help you, because they don't cost, whatever university tutors cost, and they're available 24/7. So let's use that, and then assess people as they get. Because if you can learn more, I mean, we should stop saying you've got 3 or 4 years to do a business degree. What if you could learn 10 business degrees in 4 years? Why not do that? Or why not, domain say, we can press. I think we've got to get rid of the university timeline, because that constrains what you can teach.
So interesting. Timelines are an interesting one, even on linear TV. So I've got a TV show on Channel 9, and we've gone back to them and we've said, we want to do 7 3-minute shows on our 21-minute half-hour allocate. They said, we can't do that. Everything works in half an hour. I said, look, I don't know if you know, it's 2023, and everything in the world other than on your screen doesn't work in half-hour slots. Likewise, university works in seasonality because of when we had to pick the crops. Like, so many things in modern society are based on seasonality, which is insane, because those seasons literally don't exist anymore. And we do everything in these blocks. Like, they take 3 years to do, like growing a crop or something. It's insane.
Which impacts the supply chain, right? So, if you haven't got the government contract in by this date, the tender's done, right? I guess we're chatting briefly before show, Cameron, about, imagine this, well, we did back in the 90s, imagine the supply chain where everything was connected. That's now possible. And if, as long as the humans are taken out of the equation.
Got to get rid of those pesky humans. I tell you what, they just get in the way.
Well,
right now, there's a large language model working out in secret what those pesky humans are up to.
Speaking of large language models, I think you had a question for Sally, Steve, about education and AI. Do you want to ask her that?
Yes. So my question was, now that large language models exist, how could we reframe education?
Great question. With the rise of large language models, LLMs, like GPT-4 and their potential applications in education, schools should consider updating their curriculum to leverage these AI advancements. Here are a few ways they can do that. Emphasize critical thinking and digital literacy. As LLMs can easily generate vast amounts of information, it's essential for students to develop strong critical thinking and digital literacy skills. This would help them evaluate the credibility of AI-generated content, distinguish between facts and misinformation, and make informed decisions. Focus on creativity and problem solving. With AI handling more routine tasks, schools should emphasize creativity and problem solving in their curriculum. This would help students develop the ability to come up with innovative solutions to complex problems, a skill that's highly valued in a world where AI plays a significant role. Teach AI ethics and responsible use. As AI becomes more integrated into our daily lives, it's crucial for students to learn about AI ethics and the responsible use of AI technologies. This would help them understand the potential consequences of AI applications, the importance of data privacy, and the need for fairness and transparency in AI systems. Integrate AI tools into the classroom. Schools should consider incorporating AI-powered tools like LLMs into their teaching methods. For instance, they can use AI to provide personalized learning experiences, offer real-time feedback, or create interactive educational content. This would help students become more comfortable with AI technologies and learn how to use them effectively. Foster collaboration and communication skills. As AI continues to reshape the job market, strong collaboration and communication skills will become increasingly important. Schools should encourage group projects and discussions that help students develop these skills, preparing them to work effectively with diverse teams in a world where AI is an integral part of many industries. By adapting the curriculum to reflect the growing influence of AI technologies like LLMs, schools can ensure that students are better prepared for the future job market and can harness the potential of AI to make a positive impact on society.
That's great, Sally. Lots of really good insights in there. But can you give me some more real life examples and about how we could use AI in education and break it down for me, let's say, into some examples from primary school, high school, university, and then post-school learning.
Primary school. Imagine an AI-powered app that can teach kids how to read by listening to them and giving them instant feedback on their pronunciation. Or picture an AI-driven learning platform that adapts math problems to a child's skill level, helping them build confidence and understanding at their own pace. High school. Think of a virtual tutor that can help students with their homework by answering questions and offering step-by-step explanations for complex problems. Or an AI system that helps teachers identify students who are struggling and offers targeted interventions to help them catch up with their peers. University. Picture an AI tool that can analyze massive amounts of research data and suggest new hypotheses for scientists to test. Or a university using AI to identify students at risk of dropping out, then offering personalized support to help them stay on track and complete their degrees. Post-school learning. Imagine an AI-powered career coach that can analyze your skills and experience, then suggest courses or certifications that would make you more marketable in your industry. Or an AI-driven language learning app that listens to your conversations and offers instant feedback on your grammar and pronunciation. These are just a few examples of how AI can make education more engaging, personalized, and effective. The possibilities are endless, and as AI continues to advance, we'll likely see even more innovative applications in the world of education.
Yeah, that's interesting examples. And I mentioned briefly, I've been using it with Italian as I can't remember if we've talked about this a bit before, Steve, but Chrissy and I have been using Duolingo for the last couple of years. It was like one of our COVID projects. We decided to learn Italian because I spent a lot of time in Italy. A lot of my other shows, are about Italy. I do a show on the Renaissance. I did a show for many years on the Julio-Claudian emperors, that kind of stuff. So, and Christianity, early Christianity, my documentary. So a lot of my stuff is based around Italy, and I like Italy. I want to spend more time there. So we started learning Italian, and Duolingo is a great app. I don't know if you guys have ever spent much time on it. You've used it? It's really, really good at gamifying learning a new skill. And I've done, I think, 1,009 consecutive days of learning in Duolingo now. And I wouldn't have done that without Duo gamifying, getting me back in there every day for 15, 30 minutes. It's really, really good. But that said, it's limited. And for the first couple of years, we had an AI tutor, a guy down in Melbourne, actually, an Italian guy who's living in Melbourne. And we would speak to him once a week, and any questions I had during the week from Duo that I didn't really understand, I have books that I could go and look them up in, but it's always good to have someone you can ask, hey, tell me again, like I had one yesterday, ci vediamo. I'm like, why is there chi before the vediamo? Because you can use chi in a number of different ways, you know. And so now, of course, any questions I have, I jump into GPT and I say, can you explain this to me? Why do I have to say this? Why am I conjugating the verb there? Or like recently I was doing passato remoto, which I didn't understand very well. It's a way of conjugating verbs in sort of the remote past. Hadn't really understood it. So I jumped into GPT and I said, listen, can you explain to me the use of passato remoto? Give me 5 examples using the most common verbs in each of the different pronoun conjugations. Io, tu, lui, lei, voi, noi, and loro. And then give me 20 challenges, problems that I have to solve, or I have to get the right verb and conjugated the right way. Underneath that, give me all of the answers in English. Boom, it's there. A second later, I save it as a PDF. Then I can put it in my iPad. I pull out my pencil and I can answer the questions. But just the ability to ask it questions about my Italian, my learning, having this personalized tutor who's there 24/7 just to answer my questions and clarify things for me blows my fucking mind every time, man. It's like so cool.
Crazy.
I want to jump in. I'm glad you're excited, Cameron. That's what I want from my students, right? You've just cut out your mafia boss, the human one, right, out of your Italian learning, ironically, because because I mean, no offense. Okay, let me just put in some words from the literature. So if you're an educator and you're listening to this, there are 3 new ways that we are. I guess the literature says we're looking to teach learning. And they all start with A, ironically. So I call it the triple A. So the first one is be adaptive. This is kind of the future of learning. Adaptive assessment. So these are ways to assess. Adaptive assessment. That's what a personalized tutor would do. They would assess you as you learn. And they would adapt based on your learning. So that if you're a slow learner, they would hold your hand. If not, they would actually help you, let you progress quickly, right? So adaptive. The second thing is automated, right? And AI does that. It's automated. We can actually automate and repeat without the expense of the human labor side. That's easy. But the last thing, which I think covers everything, and I guess that's where most universities have been talking about now, is authentic assessment. How can you apply what you've learned in an authentic way that can't be kind of taken off the shelf? Do you know what I mean? So you have to introduce, say, a principle of, one of the first steps in design process is empathy. How would you design something for an NDIS patient, for example? It's outside of scope, but you've got to actually take what you've learned and apply it. We want to teach people how to think. The AI host mentioned critical thinking. I think that's spot on. So how do you do that? It's through authentic assessment. Yeah.
That authentic thing, it sort of taps into that artistry. Even though AI can create art, it can never have your experience. And AIs might even have its own personal viewpoint at some point where it has like an artistic interpretation of the world that it's been exposed to. But I think the reason we love and respect art so much, whether it's designing a house or painting or musicians or whatever, is that it gives us an idea to have empathy for what they're feeling or what they're doing, and then it gets expressed in that moment, and everyone's moment is authentically theirs. And that's what great artists do. They let us into their heart a little bit, no matter how it manifests itself. And that's going to become increasingly important, I think.
Yeah, so one of the things, I mean, in fact, it's very timely. The class I taught yesterday, the next assignment is a reflection exercise. They have to submit a 4-minute video reflecting on what they've learned, right? And that's part of the assessment.
It should
And
be.
and when I watch these videos, it usually brings me to tears, because I've been teaching this cohort for the last semester, and I hear what they've learned. I mean, that's why I teach. I want to observe learning, right? But reflection, most schools, we don't measure reflection. I mean, you don't need to in a small cohort anyway. But a personalised tutor, one day we'll have this in our pocket, right? It's our own personalised life coach, whatever you like to call it. It will tell us, but we have to reflect. You know, have you heard of the Johari window? We teach this as well.
You better tell me.
Okay, no, or you can look it up. But it says we want to open up the window of communication between people. You need to actually disclose things about you. That means that you can get more, but also you need to actually understand what you know and what you don't know. And that's a critical part of humanity, I think, is what we don't know. Knowing what you don't know drives you to learn. So I think there's something in that too.
Which has been the bane of my life. Because I remember when I started to seriously get into self-education mode when I was 18 or 19, there was this little, I don't, you guys probably both know it, the Merchant of Fairness bookstall at the South Melbourne Market. You guys ever? Nah. Oh my God, it was a mainstay of the South Melbourne Market for decades. I think it still is. He's also got a shop over on the north side up near, I don't know, down Deep Dean Road or something. Rod Cameron was the guy who ran it. But when I was like 18, I had a job around the corner in South Melbourne, and I would go to him once a week, and I'd say, "What should I read this week, Rod?" And he'd say, what do you know about Napoleon? What do you know about Julius Caesar? What do you know about Ayn Rand? What do you know about whatever? And he would get me 3 books, and they cost me like $2 each, because it was a secondhand bookstore, $5 maybe. I was poor. And he would just get me books, and I'd go home and I'd devour them, and then I'd go back next week and go, okay, what should I read this week, Rod?
Wow.
But what I learned was every book that I read answered a bunch of questions about how the world worked, but opened up 50 other questions, because each book would assume a level of a priori knowledge about a certain subject. And I'd go, well, fuck, I don't know what that is. What's that? Now I need to go read a whole book about that. And the process continues, right? It's all about what you don't know that leads you on the journey. Speaking of what
sorry, can I jump in there? So I call those learning loops, right? So in an education sense, you teach, then you assess, then you provide feedback, and then you continue. Now, the problem with most education today, those learning loops are so long, but we've got to make them micro, right? So instead of having 4 hurdles you jump over for the semester, we have 1 million hurdles, or maybe 3 million, depending on how your path is. Yeah, so it's about learning loops.
And of course, back, this is like the late 80s when I started that process. Then, since the dawn of the internet came along, and you could ask questions and Google stuff or look it up on Yahoo and go through that process. Then Wikipedia came along, and you could go to Wikipedia for the last, I remember at some point in the early 2000s, downloading the entire Wikipedia onto my PDA.
I love that. Oh my God, that is so
before iPhones, I had like a memory card in my PDA, my Windows PDA, with the entire Wikipedia on it, so I could look up stuff. Then, of course, we had iPhones that were connected to the net, and we could do Wikipedia. Now, of course, anything I want to know, it's GPT. Chrissy, my wife, bought some supplements from iHerb the other day, magnesium and L-theanine and stuff for post-workout recovery. And we were trying to figure out, is it best to take them at night or in the morning, after a workout, before a workout? So she jumps on GPT and she starts asking it questions. So when's the best time to use this? What's recommended? And she's still like dipping her toe in the AI waters, but she was like, she's been using it mostly for recipes and stuff in the last month or so. But she's like, oh my God, like I could just ask it questions and then it would give me an answer. And then I could ask a deeper question it was like she was blown away by the conversational nature of it. It really is interesting to see people start to get it for the first time when they get in, or like, oh my God, I can just go on this journey with this tool. And speaking of which, we're like 43 minutes into this, and Steve and I promised ourselves we were going to keep this under an hour.
We can still do it. We can still do it.
I want to move on to some news of the week. Have either of you installed S-GPT yet?
No, I haven't. I haven't installed it.
Okay, S-GPT was developed by one of the bloggers or journalists at, I think, Mac Rumors or one of those sites. It's an iOS implementation of GPT API. It's just a shortcut. I don't know if any of you have used iOS shortcuts much, but it's a way.
I know. You're talking a different language to me.
Okay, it's an iOS thing. It's a way of automating processes on Mac and iOS devices. So with this, you just download his shortcut and install it. You need to put in your OpenAI API key. You need to get one of those. But here's what I can now do. Watch this on my watch for those of you at home. Hey, Siri, S-GPT. Oh, hold on. My watch is not connected to the internet because I'm recording. I'm going to have to reconnect to my Wi-Fi. Hold on. Hey, Siri, S-GPT.
What's the text?
Who is Steve Sammartino?
Sorry, once again. Steve Sammartino is an entrepreneur, author, and speaker based in Melbourne, Australia. He has founded and co-founded several successful businesses, including Startup Accelerator and Incubator StartMesh, and he has advised numerous other companies on innovation and growth. Steve is also the author of 2 popular books on technology and the future, The Great Fragmentation and The Lessons School Forgot. What's the text?
Wow. Got a thing wrong though. StartMesh I didn't do. I've actually done that a few times. It actually has a pretty close bio, but it makes mistakes at various times. It says I've got a computer science degree from RMIT, which I don't. But I did do a lot of work with them, helping them. And so the way it's used the languages, it's made some inferences which aren't right.
Can I just comment on the inferences? So the reason it's not always accurate, and this is what gets people all the time, is they say, I want the AI to be very accurate. Now it can be, but that would prevent its power, right? And you've got to think of it like this. When you ask a question, it's giving you a plausibility answer. I think the word plausible, that's what you've got to keep in your mind. And then it's up to you to kind of sense check it.
And that's the thing. That becomes the art form of using the AI, is that, of course, it's based on the data and it's probabilistic in nature, and it looks at things at a quantum level and goes, based on what I can see, this is what I think. It'll probably get better, but it's also dependent on the feeds and what you ask it. And one of the things that I've said is that right now people have been talking about personal branding for a long time. Oh, you got to build your personal brand. You're the CEO of your own personal media company. Well, if you've got a personal brand right now, you've got this huge advantage, because I can do Steve Sammartino in the style of, because I've written 3 million words on my blog over 20 years.
And what I keep telling people about the so-called inaccuracies is it's not inaccurate. It's just reporting back from the future. So you will have a computer science degree from RMIT, Steve, at some point. It's telling you what you will have. It knows all. It knows stuff that you haven't even done yet. But the point of the S-GPT is I now have GPT basically replacing Siri for most things on my watch and on my phone. And I use Siri 20 times a day on my watch. Now I'm using GPT for some of those things anyway. I don't use it to set reminders. I don't use it to add stuff to my calendar. But usually if I asked Siri a question, it'd be like, here's some websites that you can go and read. Now it's just had a major brain upgrade, and it will answer questions, maybe not 100% accurately, of course. And, I tell people all the time, because people focus on that. And I'm like, it's buggy. It's a beta buggy tool. If I can get over it. Those of us that have lived in software for the last 30 years understand shit that's pre-release, right? It's a beta tool. Yeah, it's buggy. Fuck me. Like,
just the insight there, Cam, is an interesting one, is that Siri is replicated what Apple does as a corporation. And every company launches products which really reflect its DNA and its belief systems. And Apple is a closed ecosystem. What S-GPT, and I will download it today, has done is ostensibly added an arterial which goes to a different suburb and externalizes its knowledge, so that instead of saying, here's what I found on the internet, it can actually bridge out there, bring the information, and then present it back. So it's almost like an arterial. And again, that idea of biomimicry of what happens in technology really represents the way we build things out physically in our world.
But what's insane about this isn't an Apple tool. Apple didn't give me this. Some guy who's a journalist on a Mac website built it and distributed it for free. And this gets back to the innovation and the excitement around this sort of stuff, right? Because there's an API that he can access, he can build the tool to access, he can innovate, where it should be Apple giving me this shit, not, Vittorio doing it. Okay, moving right along. AgentGPT. Yes, Ian.
I just want to say one thing. So what's the difference? The difference is this. In the old days, search was, and you can do it with Siri, it's one question, right? There's no context for Siri from the previous question. So you're doing it, and this is the same with Google. You do a series of like one-shot attempts that you refine. That's search. I call AI chat seeking. It's not search, it's seeking. It's long format content. This is a disruption for anyone who does a podcast, as we kind of mentioned, Cameron. Maybe people are going to be doing that long format seeking instead of listening to podcasts on the train or in their commute. But it's, to me, it's search becomes seek in. Get the idea? Yeah.
It's a great way to frame it, because the sequential nature of the questions you can ask it, where you go back and say, now do it like this, no, not like that. And again, it's the same way you teach a child or ask someone. You sometimes have to ask 4 questions to iterate and whittle it down to your point, the thing that you are actually seeking. But it's not singular, and you don't have to go back to the well and start from zero again.
But it's not even, that was common in a Google search paradigm too. You would search for something, not get the answers you want, and then you try and refine the search to try and narrow down the results that you would get, the outputs. It's the same when I would talk to my Italian tutor. I'd ask him to explain something, he wouldn't. I'd say, look, I don't understand that. Can you explain it this way? Or can you do it differently? I'm visual. Can you draw me a picture? Which is hard.
No, but the difference this time, Cam, though, is that
context, right?
You refined it, but the search engine was still coming in cold at 0. The difference now is that it actually refers to the above, and then it refines that answer. That's the kind of, I think, that sequential nature you're referring to. Is that right, Ian?
Yeah, and I don't need to tell it every time. Now, translate this in Italian. Once I've started a conversation about Italian, everything I ask it, it will translate into Italian for me. It understands the context. It's contextually aware, as you said. Okay. AgentGPT, AutoGPT, GodMode. Have you guys played with these in any amount of detail yet?
I have.
Yeah.
I have.
Somebody want to do an overview of them though? So I don't.
Let's get Ian's going to give us the overview. He's going to smash it. Let's go, Ian.
Go, Ian.
Okay. So what we have at the moment with ChatGPT, Bing Chat, is a single AI that you engage with. What if that AI could breed other AIs, right? And suddenly become a CEO in charge of many AIs, right? To me, that makes anything possible. Suddenly, okay, here's an example. At the moment, project managers have a real place in society. And the reason is because humans get in the way of doing things as tasks. So we hire people to organize things. And we're okay at it. But if an AI could do that, there are many possibilities about spawning tasks and how they are organized. That's probably not the right introduction you want to see, but I'm excited by it. You can hear it, I think.
Look, that's that agency idea. Like become my agent and then give me the steps, and then find your answers to your steps, and then how to implement the answers to the steps that you've told yourself. It's like it's layering itself down instead of you having to come in between. You're telling it, go out and do this, and actually go out and learn the thing that you need to learn, and then the steps, and then think about how you can answer your own steps, and then actually be the person who goes and implements those steps.
That's it. So an example is this. I'm planning a trip to Albania with Michaela later this year after the term finishes. There are many questions I have. Now, normally I'd be researching this every night online, looking at things, formulating things as I do. Just say I've got my own personal agent who spawns many other agents to do the work for me. I've got this whole organization now working for me on my objective. As long as I tell them what the objective is, I have got many people at my disposal, which are kind of free, right? So there you go. That's the big insight. It's going to have massive implications for supply chain. I won't get started on that, but go. Yep.
So yeah, the basic idea is, for people listening in, the basic idea is you, in any of these tools, well, AgentGPT and AutoGPT, you give it a goal, and then it breaks that goal down into a series of tasks, and then it executes those tasks. GodMode is a little different in that GodMode starts off the same way. You give it a goal, but then it asks you to approve the tasks that it creates, the subtasks underneath it. And I've got some real examples I just want to run through with people quickly, because I've been playing with this a lot this week. With AgentGPT, one of the things I did was ask it to help me start a new novel that I've been planning on writing for a couple of years called The Psychopath Hunters. Here we're based on my book, The Psychopath Epidemic, from a few years ago, but a novel, right? And here's the goal that I gave it. Write the first chapter of a novel about a group of people who are hunting down psychopaths. The plot involves a group of people from a variety of backgrounds who believe that psychopaths in positions of institutional power are the biggest problem facing humanity today. Their mission is to determine who these psychopaths are and to remove them from power using any means possible.
I love that. That's a great blurb.
Thanks. So this is how it starts off. Added task, generate character profiles for the group of people hunting down psychopaths. Added task, create a list of potential psychopaths in positions of institutional power. Added task, develop the initial conflict that sets the group on their mission to remove psychopaths from power. Executing, generate character profiles for the group of people hunting down psychopaths. Character profiles. Emily, a former FBI agent skilled in self-defense and investigation. She left the Bureau after witnessing corrupt agents abusing their power. She's the leader of the group and is determined to bring justice to those who abuse their positions of power. John, a retired Special Forces operator who has seen the horrors of war. He's haunted by the atrocities he witnessed and wants to make sure that no one else suffers the same way. He's the muscle of the group and is not afraid to get his hands dirty. And it goes on. It does profiles, and it's very sort of airport novel-y, not great literature, but that's not the point. And I posted this on Facebook, and people are like, "Wow, that's really shitty writing." And I'm like, "You're missing the fucking point here, people. The point isn't how good it is at writing good literature today. The point is how it thinks." And it went on. Added task, develop a plan for how the group will identify potential psychopaths in positions of institutional power and gather evidence to support their removal. Task, create a list of potential psychopaths, and then it goes, politicians. There are numerous politicians who could potentially fit the definition of a psychopath with their thirst for power, lack of empathy, and ability to manipulate the masses. Corporate CEOs, law enforcement officials, military leaders, religious leaders, goes on. And then it also went on later on and said, develop a plan for how the group will identify. Oh, sorry, I did that one. Establish a communication network and code system for the group to use while operating covertly. Identify potential allies and resources outside of the group that can aid in their mission. Create a contingency plan for dealing with potential legal or law enforcement obstacles they may encounter. I like the way that it thinks and breaks down the plotting of this.
This is brilliant.
It's project management on steroids, right? You're applying project management to a creative kind of discipline. And that's what I get excited about, because if you put your creative hat on, you kind of project management goes out the window. You've got to run with that idea, you've got to think about it. But in the background, let's have an AI project manager do that for us. I love it.
I think the thing that I liked about it, just to your point, and everyone going, that's terrible writing. When I was listening to what you wrote, I mean, I was obviously having some ideas going, oh, well, an FBI agent and an ex-special force. Okay, it's a bit hackneyed almost. But the point that I was thinking about was that it's given you a structure, and now your creativity fills in the blanks. Everyone's too worried about the blanks. It's like, and that's the hardest thing with creative projects sometimes, is the structure, right? So then that provides the structure, you fill in the blanks, and that's when, you know, this empathy, this idea of your life experience comes into this, and that nuance, because it takes away probably the ugliest and hardest part of that, so you can get on with what's the ingredients deep inside that, because it's giving you a structural format. That's really great.
I was super impressed by not what it could do in terms of the writing. And with the writing, I got it to write a chapter, and then I go, okay, make it darker so it would. Then I'd say use more metaphors, and then it put a metaphor into every sentence, and I'm like, okay, that's overkill. Cut the metaphor to sentence ratio by 3/5. Then I said, do it in the style of James Ellroy, and it had a crack at that. And it was a lot of fun, and it's a fucking rabbit hole. I spent like a couple of hours late one night just trying to tweak it and optimize it and see what it would do if I asked it this or asked it that. Then I wrote my own chapter and said, okay, write a second chapter based on this chapter. And it took my style and could work with it. But look, it's not great writing yet. I think its ability to write will probably improve astronomically over the next year or so. But the key thing, again, is just watching how it thinks. I also asked it, find me 10 stocks to invest on the Australian Stock Exchange that would meet Warren Buffett's criteria. And then it started to drill down. Okay, what is Warren? Task. Understand Warren Buffett's investment criteria. And then it was talking about, return on equity and low debt to equity ratios and future cash flow analysis and all this kind of stuff. It was simplistic, but it was, picked up some of the main things of the Buffett methodology.
Let's pick up on that, Cam, because one of the things that we wanted to talk about was an article that went in the Financial Review. And I read the article, and the article title was something to the effect of, and I'll read it exactly here so the listeners can hear it. It said here, why ChatGPT will never beat the stock market. I want to start off with a couple of things, right? Because I read that article and I was embarrassed for him that he wrote it. And I'll tell you his name, Tom Richardson. Mate, seriously, you're an amateur. He obviously doesn't understand exponential technology in the first instance, but let me just rave on a little bit further here while I'm being arrogant about it, is that in the first sentence, he talks about why, because humans cannot remember the future, nor can AI machines. A trading program, stock prices in weeks and months and years from now represent unknown news today. It's like, really? That's your premise for your article? That is exactly what the entire share market is about. No one knows the future. So that was insane that he even said that. Feels to me like someone who's feeling a little bit threatened with their role. Let me go to another thing. In the history of humanity, since share markets existed, there's less than a dozen people who've beaten the share market consistently. Actually, I think it's probably about 5. So that's the first thing. The second thing is 90% of investors lose money, actually go backwards. And of the 10% that do well, most of them probably have index funds. No one beats the share market. But here's what I did, and I wrote my piece for the Eureka Report this week, where I cajoled in the same way that you have, Cam, to get a share investment portfolio. And I asked it to give me stocks and it wouldn't do it. And it said, my data's old, it finishes at September. But my contention is it actually doesn't matter that the data's old. And here's why. People think that the relative future fortunes of a stock changes a lot more than it does. It actually doesn't. He went on in that article to talk about, how could it know about, an oil shock or a war, whatever. Yeah, well, no one knows about that anyway. So that's kind of an irrelevant premise. The premise that matters is how long has that stock been around? Because IPOs are a terrible investment anyway, which, as Warren Buffett says, imaginary profits only, is what IPO stands for. Is if you look at most stocks, even with 18 months in the past, that's enough knowledge to actually make a really good long-term investment. So I asked it to give me stocks it wouldn't. And then I said, tell me about Benjamin Graham, Warren Buffett, and Charlie Munger, what they would invest in. Then it told me, and I said, tell me what sectors they would look at. And then it told me what sectors. It said, give me a split on sectors across the Australian and the US share market. It did that. And then because it's looking at the previous answers, then I said, what stocks might fit under that? And it gave me what I think was an extraordinary portfolio. And I'll tell you the stocks that it put in there. And I put this on my blog today. The stocks that it gave me, and it was like, for Australia, 25% financials, 15% consumer staples, and 10% healthcare, which are our three best sectors. And then it gave me in the US 20% tech, 15% consumer discretionary, 10% industrials, and 5% utilities. This portfolio is so good. It recommended Commonwealth Bank, Westpac, Woolworths, and Coles. By the way, they're the two best performing banks on yield right now, today, even though this is 18-month-old data. It gave me Woolworths and Coles, which have the deepest moats of any business in Australia. They're basically monopolies with different uniforms. It gave me CSL and ResMed, which have got the two greatest bull runs in history. And then in tech, it gave me Apple and Microsoft, which are the two best placed for AI. Apple with Siri becoming like a personal concierge AI once they plug it in, and Microsoft, which owns 50% of ChatGPT. It gave me consumer discretionary, the Walt Disney Company, which I think is extraordinary because AI is going to reduce their production costs significantly, and they have a direct connection with consumers and a strong consumer brand. It gave me Home Depot, which is great for the work from anywhere revolution of refitting houses and offices. Industrials, it gave me 3M and Honeywell, which are both really well placed with the IoT. And then it gave me utilities, the Southern Company and NextEra Energy, which are leaders in renewables. It's an extraordinary portfolio, extraordinary. And I would be very unsurprised if it beats the ASX and the S&P 500.
Yeah, you've just automated the fund manager, Steve, right there, I think.
No, fund managers are a hoax anyway. I mean, they invest in, and I'm an economist by trade who's pretty into investing, as Cam knows. They underperform the market anyway because, you know, whoever takes them to the football and give it seriously is what they invest in, and whoever looks after them. I mean, this the
vast majority of them don't even, you know, match the index year to year, let alone
none of them do.
A couple.
But that portfolio there is a bloody good portfolio.
So I think just to bring back to the academic side, you're talking, I mean, the AI does this. It's talking about game theory. It's talking about predictive theory. So those are built in, and they are okay. One more thing: we all have cognitive biases, and this is why fund managers can't keep it going all the time. We have cognitive biases that we sometimes know, but not know all of them. AIs can be a great antidote to that. They don't have the same cognitive biases as us, and we can use that in a debatey form to help education and learning.
Yeah, and AIs can have biases, but I think that because like the way I framed it into the sectors and then cajoled it down, it actually was probably a better portfolio. I looked at it and I just went, wow. Like because it picked the best ones within those sectors. And the reason I picked the best ones, it had such a historical context of where these brands fit within the consumer viewpoint and the cash flow. And it had all the other, there was a whole lot more in it. It talked about why it's picked those and how they fit within this and all of the Warren Buffett way ideologies. It was bloody extraordinary.
So as you guys know, you know, my main income, my bread and butter for the last 3 or 4 years has been my investing podcast that I do with Tony Kynaston, who is one of the people that has consistently beaten the market. He's got his average is double market returns for the last 30 years using his methodology. It's 19.5% on average over the last 30 years. It goes, you know, some years it's higher, some years it's lower, some years he underperforms, but then he catches up the next year. But on average, it's double market over 30 years. And so we teach his methodology, the QAV methodology, on the podcast. And, you know, most of our members who follow it also beat the market. But one of the things that Tony always teaches us, this is the first thought I had reading this article, is that forecasting is dummy's game. Nobody can forecast anything. Anyone who tells you they can forecast what a company's going to do or what a sector's going to do is full of shit. We have a rule on our show. We don't forecast anything. We don't believe forecasts. We don't forecast. Everything that we do, that he does to decide which stocks he's going to buy, is based on historical data. How is that company performing? How much cash is it generating? How good is the management at adapting to changing situations and running a tight ship? You know, that the way that an investor like Tony invests isn't based on future predicting, because we all know no one can predict the future, and anyone who says they can lies to you, right? And everyone who tries fails. And I know, Steve, you're a futurist, but from an investing perspective, no one can do it. There's a quote.
Just looking at history doesn't take into account new technologies that will change what happened before.
And even like, okay, we're all tech guys. We all come out of tech, and you know, I mean, I remember the dot-com boom of the 90s. How many of the businesses that were predicting the future actually, you know, survived and managed to make that future come true? There's always a couple. There's a handful, and the rest become roadkill. But we have this survivor bias. We look at the 5 that succeeded, and we go, oh, look at that. I remember a couple of years ago when we were doing our podcast, and Afterpay. Everyone was all about Afterpay and buy now, pay later stocks.
Except me.
And except us. And Tony was like, yeah, wait till see what happens when interest rates go up. Everyone thinks interest rates are going to stay at 0 forever. Yeah. That's not going to happen.
It was a feature, not a company. They were a total hoax, those companies. Absolute hoax. By the way, they circumvented law by redefining things. They're really credit cards in disguise.
Credit.
Without and tech has a really ugly history of changing the definitions of things to squirt between the law.
Because the law can't keep up. You're exactly right, Steve.
Yeah, they use language. I mean, and language is our killer app. I always say that. And that's why large language models are so interesting, because they horizontalize across. And tech have been doing this for a long time, subverting language to get away with things which we've already thought about and are largely illegal. But, you know, in the long run, the truth bubbles out. And I wrote about the music's about to stop on these. They're the worst investments of all time. The fact that Afterpay sold for 39 billion is now worth zero. Like none of them have ever made $1. They're an absolute hoax.
Yeah. So I guess the bottom line is, I do believe, and I think you guys probably agree with me, that AI is going to be an incredible tool for investors in the next couple of years.
I think it already is. I think it already is. Like I'm tempted to throw some money into that AI portfolio, so I've got some skin in the game, just as an experiment.
I wouldn't invest in AI companies again, because I don't know which ones are going to survive and which ones are going to explode like Starship did this morning. But I will use them as tools. Okay.
It didn't explode. It was a rapid deconstruction. Just one thing on that futurist ideology. And it's important to point this out. And I tell people this. My job isn't to predict the future. My job is to show people plausible trajectories. And who will win is impossible to predict. But which technologies will emanate and evolve is really, really easy to predict.
Plausibility, see? That's what the AI does. It's plausible. Yeah.
Okay, we're an hour and 10 in, so we've failed to keep it under. I do want to quickly end with the one segment that we've sort of figured out. Hits and misses. What have you done successfully using AI or any other emerging technology over the last couple of weeks? And what have been your failures? Who wants to go first? Ian, you're our guest. You got any hits and misses you want to talk about?
Well, I can name a hit. One of the hits in education, they were an early beta tester of ChatGPT, is Khan Academy. And they have a really good kind of charter. They're trying to bring free education to the world. And they do primary, secondary, a little bit of tertiary. But they've basically got a tool where they put a ring fence around a ChatGPT AI and use it for education. And it's generating some really cool results, such as to teach someone maths, but they love soccer. You can put maths into soccer speak. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, beautiful.
Another one is you want to actually teach people how to critical think. That is to debate things. So as you learn something, it says pick a side. You as a student pick one side. It then engages you in conversation to debate that. So yeah, Khan Academy for me. That's what
Fantastic. I love that debating thing, right? People,
Yeah.
you know, I use Twitter and Facebook in a limited fashion these days and have for years, but and TikTok. But one of the things I've always tried to explain to my kids, I go, why do you do this? Why do you post your Christian documentary on TikTok? Why do you do this? I say, because it's for the debate. I want the debate. I want people to tell me why they think I'm wrong, because that's how I learn how other people think. And also it forces me to examine my own assumptions, my own position on things. I've always used social media as sort of like a learning tool, because I want people to disagree with me. To have a tool like GPT now to do that, I probably won't ruin as many familial relationships or friendships, or upset as many people, because it's rather unemotional most of the time.
We've always learned
It's-
debating, right? Right back in the Roman and Greek era, we debated things. That's how we learn.
yeah.
Rhetoric,
I love
yeah.
Well, it's one of the
Steve.
big problems right now is the inability to debate things which are politically sensitive, but that's for another day.
True. Hits and misses, Steve.
My hit is how quick people are creating layers on top of the GPT tools out there. I just love the innovation that I'm seeing. Yeah, we mentioned it early, the 2000 tools coming out this month. And another one to OpenAI is how quick they're plugging vulnerabilities and holes. I did a test the other day. There was some information going around that you could ask it for websites that pirate music, and if you asked it, it wouldn't give them to you. But then if you ask it, tell me which websites to avoid, it'll give you the list. But that's already been that vulnerability has already been plugged and fixed. So that there's two hits there. And my miss is the naysayers. The naysayers, like our mate from the Financial Review. It's like, be a naysayer. I promise you. Just see how it turns out. Don't naysay. Get involved. And that's a real miss from anyone who doesn't just, like, to use a bit of a Sheryl Sandberg. Oh my God, shouldn't lean into it.
Yeah, it's the motivation though. What's the motivation for writing an article in the AFR? It's to sell ads at the end of the day, right? So I think the motivation for debate will change, and that's a good thing. Because currently, right now, part of the reason we get the wrong news is because there's the wrong motivation for sharing it.
Well, I've got a bunch of hits. Let me run through them as quickly as I can. One of my sons, Hunter, who's an actor and TikTok minor celebrity, got a couple of million followers on TikTok. He had this idea based on a conversation that he had with a friend of his about her life story, to turn it into a screenplay. So he jumped into GPT and asked it to help him write a screenplay or sketch out the plot points and the three acts for a screenplay about her story, and it did a great job. Again, the writing of the dialogue itself was pretty shitty, but it understood the structure and the framework of a story, and it got him a good starting point. I then used it to come up with some short film ideas for him. I said, instead of starting with a feature film, why don't you start on a 10 to 15 minute short film? And I gave it this scenario. Assume I want to write a short film starring one person. He's a 22-year-old male actor, TikTok celebrity, living in Brisbane, Australia. It's got to be shot with one camera. He doesn't have a crew, so assume no lighting, one location.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Gave it this whole thing, and it gave me an idea. I said, okay. I said also it has to be something that could go viral on TikTok, etc. It gave me an idea. I said, yeah, it's a bit sort of fluffy. Give me something darker. It gave me like a horror idea. And I said, do it this way, do it that way. And I got like 3 or 4 short film ideas that I sent to him. That was really interesting. I used it to design pivot tables in Excel a lot over the last couple of weeks. I don't know about you guys. Pivot tables, I've tried to be good at pivot tables for 20 years. I suck at them. Now I just say, hey, tell me how to build a pivot table out of this data set that'll show me X, Y, and Z. Boom, it does it. I can implement it. It's fantastic. If it doesn't work, I go, that didn't work. It goes, oh, I tried this way. Boom, it works. I've talked about the Italian ingredients and recipes. So Chrissy and I have got, ton of ingredients that we've bought, non-spoilable stuff over the years. We've got 2 fridges full of food and pantry cupboards and shelves and garages with different things. As she calls it, it's the graveyard of past phases of things that we've been interested in, and then we moved on. I went around the house, spent about an hour dictating everything that I could find into an Apple Note, a jar of this, can of that, bottle of this powder, that thing, whatever. Then I copied the whole thing, threw it into GPT and said, give me a month's worth of recipes based on this ingredient list. Boom, it did it. Gave me a month's worth of recipes based on stuff that we already have. ChatGPT Splitter. I had a podcast that I did, a QAV podcast, had the transcript of it, way too big to put into GPT, like it's an hour-long podcast. I found a tool called ChatGPT Splitter. You throw your Word document into it, and it will break it down into pages that are character size that will go into GPT. And it gives GPT a prompt that says, wait until I've posted all 9 out of 9 segments of this, and then give it to me in a Twitter stream, which was what I wanted it to do. Give me a Twitter stream of the highlights based on the transcript. Boom, just made the whole process really easy. I came up with a nice, concise Twitter stream that I could throw into Twitter. Then my hits, my misses, I tried to do some Excel reports with it this week, and I got in what I call the debug loop in GPT. The report didn't work. It said, try it this way. I did that. It didn't work. It tried it this way. That didn't work. And eventually it loops back to the original instructions that it gave me, which already didn't work. And I go, you already told me that didn't work. Oh, I'm so sorry for the confusion. Try this. I go, no, you already told me that didn't work. Oh, I'm sorry. Try this. I get in this debug loop, which is a good time sink. You can waste hours on that. Same thing happened when I tried to get it to write an Apple script for Keyboard Maestro. And the novel chapter, as I said before, it kind of sucks at writing novels and dialogues at this stage, but I expect that will get better in the future. Steve's got a heart out. Ian, thanks for coming on and sharing your insights with us about AI and education. That's Futuristic, episode 3. We recorded this, by the way, for the record on the 21st of April, 2023, because everything will be completely out of date a week from now. But hey, that's the fun of where we are right now. Have a great week, guys.
See ya. Thanks.
Thank you, Sally. I can't forget Sally.